Hello, everyone. I just want to welcome you to today's open house session for our Master of Science program. Uh, Today, we'll have the opportunity that you can talk to members of our staff and members of our alumni to get a better feel, a better sense about our program. Because yes, it is an online program, but we are more engaging. We want the interaction. We're also strong in building community, and we see this as a value when you're part of the program and part of our community. So at this point, let me introduce you to Dr. Jessica Bachler, who's one of the co-founding directors for the Alef Trust.
Thank you very much, Nick, and hello everybody, welcome. It's really good to have you here. Nice to see new faces in the room. I'm also recognizing some people who have been in our community before in varying roles, so welcome. So I'm going to do a little presentation just to kind of seed the conversation, and we'll take it from there, and we'll flow quite fluidly from your responses, your questions, your observations. I invite all of that into the room. And with me also are several alumni who've been on this course, and I'd like to just introduce them, and they'll get a chance to share their experiences as well. We'll weave them into the conversation quite organically. So they are, give us a wave when I mention your name, Sue Evans.
Hi.
Hey, thank you, Sue. Good to have you here. And Adrian Vickers. And then we also have Laura Needham. Good to have you here. I'm just looking through the room to see if I've missed anyone, because there were a couple of other people who said they might be able to make it, but I'm not seeing them at the moment. So if they make it, then I'll introduce them as well. But thank you very much, Laura, Sue, and Adi for being here today. So let me tell you a little bit more about this program, what it means to us, what it's about, and then the floor is over to you, and we can have a conversation about, what is this learning experience on this program. You're investing 3 years of your life. That's a big investment. And yeah, we want you to get a good feel for what is the lived experience of being on this master's program. And I'm going to just screen share so that you can see my presentation that I have for you. Here we go. Is that screen, is that full screen for you, that presentation? Yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up there. Fantastic. Great. It's a little small there, what's written inside the person. I'm looking at that and thinking I need to make that bigger. But essentially, I've got the world map there. Why? Because this program is a global program. We have people who join us from, gosh, now some 40, 50 countries around the world. And it's also one of the most exciting things, I feel, on this program, that we have such a culturally diverse student community. And when I say student, really think of people from all walks of life and of any age. So many of our students are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. We have students in their 70s. So people who are experienced, many of them very experienced professionals who are coming from a diverse range of professions, working fields, and who are very interested in integrating transpersonal psychology, principles of transpersonal studies, principles of spirituality into their world of work, into their existing professional practices. So hence the world map, and hence also this, the person, the meditating person there, or the person in the yoga pose. And inside this little person, there are these three circles: engaging the mind, engaging the heart, and engaging the will. And I really mean that as a metaphor for whole person learning or whole person inquiry. What we're doing over 3 years, over the course of 3 years on this program, is to really deep dive into the nature of transpersonal development, of what it means to be a whole person, and what it means to relate through holistic, integrative lenses with the big questions of our time. And we do that through, there's an arc to the program, if you will, and I'm going to take you through that to give you a feeling for what it feels like if you decide to join. So I'm going to just move the slide forward. So in terms of the overarching principles that we're combining, we are combining the academic learning very much with the cultivation of the experiential, learning through the heart, learning through the body, and the sense of application, bringing the learning straight into our work, and into places that matter to us. This could also be, family oriented or oriented towards community practice, where you may be of service to a particular group of people. But yes, academic learning is very much at the heart of what we do, of course, because this program is a university program. It's accredited by Liverpool John Moores University here in the UK, and the university helps us quality assure the program, so it really complies with all the standards of a master's program internationally. So it's an internationally recognized master's. And academic learning to us means a cross-disciplinary engagement, studying consciousness, studying spirituality, and exploring transpersonal psychology, which is a specialist field of psychology concerned with whole person development and concerned with the nature of transformation. What is transformation, and how is transformation relevant for us individually and collectively as a human species? And we do that by exploring a lot of different kinds of theories coming from the field of transpersonal psychology and consciousness studies. We also examine very much our own beliefs and assumptions, and we aim to cultivate reflexivity and discernment as we're engaging with our world's wisdom traditions, with contemporary forms of spirituality. We're really trying to see how are these relevant in today's world? How can we work with these models and ideas and insights and really apply them and bring them into what it is that we're already doing in our lives and in our work. I'm going to move that slide forward again. So I mentioned it already. Another really overarching principle is experiential learning, the cultivation of presence, the cultivation of the heart, the cultivation of other ways of knowing. All of these are really critical to understanding transpersonal psychology or integrative or integral psychology. We cannot engage in those practice, or we cannot engage with integral theory or transpersonal theory just through intellectual modes. We really have to bring the whole of ourselves into play to understand these practices from the inside out. And so that is what we do throughout the program. We bring in practice, we cultivate other ways of knowing, whether that is in essay writing, or whether that is in research, for example, or whether that is in project development. And those are all things that you'll be doing if you are engaging on this master's. And then last but not least, here we have applied learning. So the cultivation of the will, of our action potential in the world. And that's very much about prototyping and piloting new practice models. We have modules that are specifically concerned with that. And this aspect of our study is also about applying transpersonal principles in your life and work. And then if we're doing that, understanding what are the ethical implications and what about questions of efficacy. So how do we know what we're doing is good practice, and how do we know it's having an impact in the world? How do we know it's of value in the world? So we spend quite a bit of time exploring that through research and through considering the ethics of practice in the transpersonal field. So here you have, and this is the last slide that I'm sharing before we're opening the floor for questions, for comments. Here you have the modular pathway, the modular structure of the MSc program. And I mentioned before, it's 3 years. So you can see here on the left-hand side, year one begins with 3 modules, approaches to consciousness, really looking at what is the nature of consciousness through varying lenses, including depth psychological lenses, mystical lenses, but also cognitive neuroscience and quantum mechanics. It's a really exciting module. It's complex. You jump right in at the deep end with that one. There are a lot of technical terms. People always say they're sitting down with a dictionary when they're working through that module. But it's a very useful module that really opens up the big questions around what is consciousness, how are we to understand consciousness, and what are the different models that are out there in relation to understanding the human mind, understanding the psyche. And then that is complemented with spiritual psychology, a module that really looks at the insights that we have from spiritual traditions, but we're looking at them through psychological lenses. So we're trying to understand how are these ideas from our spiritual and indigenous wisdom traditions, how are they relevant, and how can we understand them in terms of the psychological dynamics that they engender. And also we have a module called Learning Through Integrative Practice. And this is an experiential module. There you are designing your own program of integrative practices, holistic practices, looking at the physical domain, the body, looking at the spiritual domain, looking at the emotions and the relational domain and the intellectual domain. So really looking at yourself holistically and kind of sensing, ooh, what is it that I would want to cultivate further in my life? And that's really the experiential component, to embed the learning in a lived way and not just make it about, knowledge acquisition or understanding things in intellectual ways. You also see there in the center of the slide, there's a circle outlining specialist options. And the ones that are listed on the left-hand side, those are the ones that become available when you're taking the module Spiritual Psychology. And then when we jump into year 2, we have 3 modules again. Here the focus shifts very much towards beginning to apply, considering principles of application. So we have the field of transpersonal psychology that's being introduced in a module, really mapping that field, the history of it, as well as the current developmental edges of that field. Then applied transformative psychology, that dives very much into envisioning practice. So if students have just finished that module, actually, it runs in the second half of year 2. And one of the assignments is a case study, a case study plan, where people are putting their ideas down on paper, saying, oh, this is what I want to do. This is what I could see myself doing in my organization, in my community. And then thinking through the practical, the very pragmatic and ethical implications of making that happen. It's quite an exciting module. And then research design, really, well, we're landing here in that element of monitoring practice, evaluating practice, and seeing how can practice be further developed, enhanced by understanding what are the dynamics at play, and so on and so forth. So that module is a year-long module. It covers the principles of research design if you're new to research. And then it introduces qualitative as well as mixed methods, approaches to research. And it also introduces transpersonal methods or approaches to research, bringing in the whole person into the research process. So this includes art-based research or using contemplative or embodied approaches in research, how you can be, really creative and dynamic in exploring these cutting-edge topics that are covered in the transpersonal field. And then last but not least, year 3, we've got the research dissertation. There's a real shift there in the program, where year 1 and year 2 are really very structured. There's a lot that's happening in the calendar that you get when you join. Year 3 is more individually determined, because you are undertaking your own research, your own project, and you're supported by a supervisor who guides you through that process throughout the year. I think I'm going to pause there. I'm going to just give the alumni a chance to comment on this, to kind of maybe bring up some initial observations, thinking back about the journey that you've had. How has it felt? And listening to me now, what comes back to you? So maybe if we could pass the talking stick around between the 3 of you. Sue, do you fancy making a start?
Yeah, I'm happy to make a start. I was looking at that last slide. I thought, I want to do it all again. I think the first thing I would say is that even though this is an online program, Jessica has an amazing knack to make it a really inclusive community. And you sit in front of your computer waiting for the module to come on to start, and you feel like you're in a room with all these people. You never feel that you're on your own. You're always supported by somebody. And so if anyone's got any qualms about doing this online, don't at all, because it's really an amazing experience. So yeah.
Thank you for that. I didn't tell her to say this. That's very kind of you, Sue. Before the doors opened, I said, say whatever you feel like saying, you know, because also talk about the things that were difficult, because I want everyone to know what happens, and I want it to be real. So Sue, thank you for being so kind, though. Yeah.
But I'll also say about the first module, approaches to consciousness, is tough. It is a very difficult one, but it sets the scene for the whole of the course, I think. And I think Les, with his love of academic rigor, is really, he puts you on the spot, makes you think, but it's a really worthwhile experience doing that first module alone, I think.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sue. We're just actually sitting with that module. We are tweaking it, making changes, been sitting in the module tutor teams, and we're always feeling into, okay, what's the best way forward? What are we picking up in the student community? And in the past, we've relied quite heavily on forums, written forums, people writing posts on specific topics and then tutors responding. And what we were hearing in the student community was that there was a greater hunger for possibly more one-to-one or group tutorials, some more live interaction. So we're kind of tweaking that a little bit in that module this coming year. So there'll be more sort of small group-based discussions. The forums are still there, but we're kind of always modulating and noticing what wants to happen and what's conducive. Thanks for that, Sue. I can see a hand up there by Rosemary. Come on in.
Yes, sorry to be late. Can you tell me whether you're going to deal with feeling as well as thinking?
Did I hear you correctly? Are you
going to deal with the embodiment of the issue that's being discussed, or just the thought processes?
No, very much, Rosemary. So the embodiment of practices and of ideas and of theory is very much at the heart of this program. Yes, 100%. So even in year one, there is a module that's dedicated entirely to that, focusing on integrative practices, exploring what practice means to you. Practices of inner development, I mean, in the broadest sense of the word. So it's a definite yes, Rosemary. And I can see another hand up by Dawn there. Come on in.
Hi, sorry, I left education at 16. So I'm like, but expansion of consciousness is something I've been studying for a very long time on my own. So it's kind of intimidating just being like, jumping back into this. So I have a few questions around, I don't want you to have to explain like getting back into education for me, but I guess I've been studying it a lot through, applying it to practice, like to deliver workshops and programs. And I'm an artist. I call myself an alchemist. I definitely say I'm an alchemist. But yeah, so is this something that possibly I could engage with in like my own way, in terms of going through the different parts of the program, but also maybe looking at it to develop experimental film and sound things, as could that be part of how I explore this, or is it very much essay written?
It's a great question. So I'll say a couple of things. One, in our community, there are a lot of people who would resonate with what you just expressed. We've got actors, dancers, we've got filmmakers on the course, people coming from many different sort of creative spheres. So you'll find there are a lot of like-minded people. And where possible, people will weave art making into the coursework that's required throughout the program. But if that said, there is also a quite heavy academic component. So I definitely don't want to downplay this, and you will find yourself writing essays and writing research reports. So yes, it is demanding in that regard. It is quite academically rigorous. We are just building out a sort of springboard for academic training that we're going to release. It's going to be a self-paced course that hopefully will come on stream in early September, just to help people kind of jump into this course because it's master's level and because we're meeting certain learning outcomes through John Moores University, through the sort of academic regulations there. So it's a bit of a both and answer to you, Dawn. Yeah. You'll get the resonance, and you'll get to be creative, but you'll also get to, or you're put on the spot academically. Yes, I think I can't deny that. And that's one of the hardest things for some people. They land in the program and then they realize, oh my God, this essay is, it's full on. And I have to understand how to construct an essay. I have to understand how to research databases, and how to really get a handle on information research, empirical research, and how to integrate that into my essay writing. So it really pushes you in that way, and I really don't want anyone to think that isn't happening. Yeah, I'm wondering also whether one of the alumni wants to comment on that, your experience of that, because this is a critical piece.
If not, I have a follow-up to the question.
Go on, Dawn, and then we'll maybe, or maybe let Sue answer that one, and then we'll come back to you. And I can see lots of other hands up as well. Yeah.
I was just quickly going to say, Dawn, that when I did the course, I didn't have a first degree, so I didn't have a bachelor's. So I just came onto it not having really done anything in further education, and it's not easy. It's tough, but you get a lot of support, and you do it. So don't be put off by that.
Thank you. Just a quick question then. So what would you say is the benefit of exploring these topics in this essay, like academic way? Because I mean, I feel like creativity is sort of like, for me, it's the bit that holds, that access to the abyss of like joining everything together. So, I mean, I'm very much doing this anyway, but I'm excited to see that there is this available in a very organized way of like approaching things. But what would be the benefit of doing this, studying all these topics in an academic way?
I love that question, and I could answer it, but I'm also seeing that Adie's got her hand up. Adie, you want to respond to that one? Great. Yeah.
Hi, Dawn and everybody. Lovely to see you all today. I think that's a really good question, because I'm a practitioner. I've been doing something for 30 years in education, which I guess is kind of academic in a way, but we work in a creative way. And I had to ask myself, why am I doing this? Why put myself through 3 years of hard work when I could just, do my creative thing? But actually, what it's given me is confidence and a really solid framework, so that I feel more equipped to be able to hopefully affect some changes within mainstream education, bring the transpersonal there. So for me, it was very much about applying this, but also applying these skills, because learning these skills, like Sue says, Sue and I were lucky enough to be in a peer group from the very start. And that's another thing I want to say, that peer support is amazing. And we would give ourselves goals, we'd say, let's have this finished by such and such time. But I think we all became more confident, and in the real world, in our daily lives, in our own contexts, to have something to support us and back us up. So when I have to talk to the Department of Education, I know that I'm not alone anymore in my own little bubble. I'm able to, I've got the sort of the research behind me, I'm able to talk about other educators, people who've been doing very creative and alternative things in the field. So that's just my own experience, but it's been really beneficial, Dawn, if that's helpful.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. I've run workshops before on things as well. And you do find yourself in a place where you're like, I don't know if they know what I'm talking about. So it's easy just to be, it would be great to be able to say, this is the field and I'm part of it. So thank you. Thanks.
Super. Thank you for those questions. And thank you, Adi, for articulating that so beautifully. I can see we've got hands up. Just to mention in terms of the chat questions, if you, Adi, and Sue, and where is Laura, if you could respond where possible in the chat window, because I can't keep an eye on that as well. And Nick, if there's something in relation to admissions, thank you. Fab. Let's have a look then. We've got Dennis. Dennis, would you like to unmute and come on in?
Yeah, thanks. Look, quick question, because I sort of put this off last year. Like, I'm in a pretty super high pressured executive role in a startup, and you know, shit gets pretty crazy all the time. So I just wanted to find out, like, it kind of sounds like this is intense. So being kind of in a high pressure job, like, how realistic is it to do that and sort of, you know, undertake a degree like this?
Yeah, fair question. There are some people who do that. It depends what else is going on in your life. If you've got family, kids, dog, cat.
No, none of that. Yeah, none of that. Just a job. My job is my kids and my dog and everything wrapped into one. So
okay,
yeah.
It's doable, but it will put you under pressure. The workload, you know, when it's a little more quiet, maybe it's about 10 hours a week. But when you're working up to assignments, some people find themselves working 20 hours a week, perhaps more. Wow. Yeah, because, you know, it depends on how well you can pace yourself and how much you plan ahead in terms of kind of working towards your assignments and working through the learning tasks associated with the modules. There are always a couple of modules running concurrently, and then there are those kind of hotspots in the academic year, notably towards the spring, which is when the academic deadlines are coming, right? So February, March time, and then again towards May, June. Those are the crunch points often when people say, oh, can't, you know, I'm struggling. Can I have extensions? Can I defer this module and that module? We'll work with that, of course, but it's not ideal to have to go into a sort of deferral mode. John Moores University is very strict with those kinds of things. And then we have to go through application processes, personal circumstances applications, and so on and so forth. So yes, it's a really important question to ask. Do you want to put your evenings, your weekends into doing this over the course of certainly 2 years? Because the first 2 years are these very highly structured years where you have those deadlines and where you have 2 modules running concurrently. Year 3, you probably find it eases off because you're working on your own project there and you can pace things a bit more according to what works for you. Is that helping? Yeah.
It is. I mean, definitely, like I said, it's just, that's the thing that put me off from doing it last year, because we were kind of in fundraising mode. And to be honest, we're in fundraising mode again. So, you know, I'm sort of, I'm just kind of figuring out whether to do it now or next year. But, you know, it's, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Totally fair point. Really important. And we don't want anyone to burn out doing this course. That would be totally counterintuitive. Yeah, thank you. And Florian, you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. I have a more specific question on the research and the reading during the studies. And my question is basically, are the books and the articles provided in a PDF format, like with DIN A4 pages? Because I'm thinking about buying an e-reader or a tablet for the readings. Do you have any advice on this? Maybe?
Okay, yeah, there's a variety of ways that we provide resources. In part, you'll get access to the library of John Moores University. So that's, you know, university library access with electronic databases where you'll be able to download things to your electronic devices. And then we also make resources available in PDF format on the actual module sites, on our learning environment canvas. And then there will be some recommendations for book purchases. So some things that you'll need to get yourself, and you can decide to get an e-version of a particular book, most of them available in e-format. So it sort of varies, really. Yeah.
So is it, do you think it is worth like buying such an e-reader, let's say, for if I would get just for the PDF format type?
Not sure. Maybe I'll
Not
put
sure?
that to the, yeah, I'm thinking to putting this to the alumni. How did you manage the reading and the organization of resources? I don't know whether I would buy an e-reader, but I tend to, my personal preference is I work on the, large scale computer screen because I find that easiest for reading something that's, an online document. But people have got different preferences. So that's why I'm thinking maybe if our alumni could outline a little bit, how did you engage with the resources? How did you manage your learning? Yeah, Sue.
I have got 2 bookcases of books now since I went on the course. I was forever buying books. But that aside, I think John Moore's library is excellent. They're very helpful as well to find you a paper. And what I did, I downloaded all my papers into Mendeley or Zotero, which is I'm not sure how you would describe it. It's sort of like a library for your papers. And it meant that you never lost a paper. It could be like, oh, where did I read about so and so? And you've got all your papers on your computer. I personally printed some of my papers because I like to read a paper. But I know that a lot of people managed very well with an e-reader or, some sort of digital format. I think it's very much down to personal preference.
Thanks for that, Sue. Adi or Laura, do you want to add anything?
I personally also used Mendeley as well, so I'm another advocate for Mendeley. I think a lot of students didn't, though. I don't think you have to. I found that it organised everything for me. I found it also helped with just the double checking of referencing. There's all sorts of little tools in there within the Mendeley that's, you have to obviously know how to reference, of course, but it sort of was like like kind of double check things like that you had like little things correct, like references and things. It holds everything. You could have lots of folders. It helped me with my organization because I found sometimes that my laptop folders would sort of get a bit scattered because when you are doing an assignment or even more the dissertation, you just read so much, I won't speak for everybody else, but I read so much and I was always diving down a rabbit hole as well. So I was like, oh, that's interesting and barely related. But then you would often find something that really was related in the rabbit hole that you went down. But with kind of the folders on my laptop, I would sometimes then be in full swing writing my, dissertation or assignment or whatever it is, and then you suddenly think, oh, I know what's great that's going to come in right now perfectly. Now where is it? So then you have to trawl through your laptop or e-reader or whatever, whereas Mendeley, I found it very easy. I would just always have it up on my laptop and all you needed to do was sort of type in even some words that you sort of had read in the paper or even vaguely, like, oh, I remember, I think this was the name of the author or something like that, and the article just pop up and you could just kind of get it up straight away and put it in. So yeah, I'm a bit of an advocate myself for Mendeley.
Thank you, Laura. I can see Eddie is also unmuted, so do you want to come in and then we'll move along with the questions? Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking that there are quite a few people in the room, so maybe there's somebody, one of you is similar to me, and I have to confess I'm extremely disorganized. So if any of you are really disorganized and you're wondering how you'll be able to organize yourself, the answer is you can. Out of chaos comes order. I did buy books. I also used what they call the Kindle e-reader. So I have a combination of physical books and online books. I would have had 190 tabs, a bit like Laura, talking about many, many rabbit holes. I would have had 190 tabs open on my laptop just before submitting my dissertation. But I think Rosemary earlier was asking about, is there a feeling dimension to the learning? And I would say there really is, because when I sort of tapped into my own intuition, the right paper would appear. And another person, some of my sons would see my laptop and laugh at me. How on earth can you work like that? But actually, the more I trusted the embodied approach, the easier it became. So I just wanted to say that to Rosemary as well.
Thank you for that. Thank you. All right, let's move along in the questions. And Florian, if you've got others, I'll loop back around to you if that's okay later on.
Yes.
Suzanne.
Yeah, nothing else, no one else has spoken about the feeling aspect at all. And I wonder how many people are present in their bodies right now, because my work over the last 30 years has been with Kirlian photography and consciousness of the individual presence in the now, whether they're actually fully in their body. When you're in your head, you often aren't aware of whether you're grounded or not, therefore whether you're embodying that information. And none of the work that I've been able to read when I did my last degree actually dealt with this aspect of consciousness. The work I've done with Stanley Krippner, who's now retired from Saybrook, and people in Russia, etc. There are people out there doing this, but very few have been accepted by this formal environment where the academic putting into words is not possible. If you've just been raped, how do you feel? You can't put into words. You can see the person's face. And the average doctor knows nothing about the human body. I was a remedial masseuse for 30 years, and they don't know when they're on the table, because they've given your body to you to treat, where their organs are. They are not in touch. The metaphor is the word made flesh. And if you use that in academic fields, they look at you gone out. So for me, the feeling is, yes, is your arse in gear? Are you in the here and now? Is there a practical application for what I'm doing? Would there any of that be appropriate in this subject, please?
100%. Yes. And I'm just acknowledging, Rosemary, that you're, just by mentioning this and the way you're speaking of it, I think you are bringing us into the body. The moment you started speaking, I could feel myself landing back in my body. And this session, of course, is very much just about asking questions, seeing what are the practical concerns that people have. But yes, I feel this program, the heart of it is about the whole bodied engagement with these topics. And the sessions we have, whether they're webinars or tutorials, we're moving together. I mean, when I open my webinars, I invite people to dance in their room. There may be music on, or maybe it's even silent, and we're moving together. Or we might begin with a breath practice, feeling into the flow of the breath. Or we might have a lecture and pause and doodle together to notice what's playing out on a deeper level in terms of patterns, doodling together, and then sense make together. So we have all the tutors have got their own ways of weaving in that embodied sense making throughout. And we really encourage that diversity, so that all these different ways of sense making, alternative ways of knowing, can come more and more to the fore. Yeah.
And can you give one other question? How much is it? Because someone talked about grants and things. I hadn't even looked at that side, I'm afraid.
Sure. Nick, if you could put something into the chat window, because I don't know that off the top of my head, if I'm honest. There's information on the website, Rosemary, but I'm sure Nick can take care of that as well. Yeah. Suzanne, I think I had invited you to speak.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead. Yes.
I just want to say that I really agree with Rosemary, that I think that the pathway for healing has got to be experiential, and I think the spiritual pathway has to be as well. I think if the mind gets in the way, you just simply couldn't get there. But I think the mind is very useful, and that's why I have been interested in this course, because you have to create the paradigms and the pathways for people to move through if you're going to guide them, and that's what I'm feeling about where I'm. If I'm going to go in this direction, that's what I'd need. I've got a question, a general one, because I was going to ask about the resources, but it's been answered. My question is, the first time I came across Alef, I was actually at something called Beyond the Brain. And the consciousness, the view there is very much that it is beyond the brain. And much greater. And I wanted to ask you whether that is, what the Alef view is of consciousness, because you've talked a lot about understanding it, and I want to make sure that our understanding is the same.
Yeah. Alef Trust is very much aligned with the Scientific and Medical Network and with the work of the Galileo Commission. And so in terms of the organization, I would locate us in the post-materialist paradigm. But then, of course, we're all also individuals who have our own locations, as it were. But we sort of coalesce around the idea that consciousness does not arise from brain activity, is not so. We're not located in the materialist paradigm. We're interested in exploring alternative views. And yeah, some of us would say that consciousness is a kind of primary quality, and matter arises as a secondary phenomenon. Some of us would suggest that consciousness and matter are co-arising. So there are different models and different ways of thinking about this. But I think all the staff who come together in the Alef Trust are looking at consciousness through the post-materialist lenses and seeing, okay, what are the implications for living? Because we're not just interested in rationalizing all of this and kind of talking it over intellectually, but then really seeing, what does that mean for the world? And one of the sort of fundamental recognitions, or at play at that is this sense of interconnectedness, and that it's not just again intellectual, right? But you can experience it through practice. When we practice, when we follow different spiritual pathways, we may sense that
you can't
level.
recognize unless you already know. Recognition is a reflexive verb.
Yeah, beautiful. Rosemary, loving that. Thank you. Yeah. So I hope, Suzanne, that answers it a little bit. But, there are so many different views. Laura's got her hand up. Yes. Laura, one of our alumni. Please come on in.
Thank you, Jessica. We're just going to add a little bit in response to Rosemary and I think Suzanne, their questions about bringing in the emotional and the embodiment and the grounding with regards to the course itself. There is, as has already been discussed, so I won't go over a fair bit of intellectual kind of content. You will have to write papers and you have to research, etc. But there is a great balance with embodiment, in not just in the way that the course is approached, which as Jessica talked about, which is the way the module leaders approach the grounding and getting in the body, but also in the actual course itself. So I'll just give a couple of examples of that so it's not too abstract, or you don't just have to take my word for it. There's a module called Learning Through Integrated Practice, which is one that you do in the first year, and this is really it's very transformative for me in turn, and I think a lot of people in terms of personal growth, because you are the subject. So we're looking at it through like an intellectual lens, in the sense that you have a subject, but you are the subject, and you choose practices for yourself that you will, and I don't want to go into too much detail, you want to have some surprises when you get to the course, but you will look at your own personal practices in terms of physically in the body. You'll do something physically for the body, psychologically for the psyche, emotionally, interpersonally and spiritually. So you'll take 5 components and you will choose what practice or what you want to focus on, and you will do a diary and a journal and all personal discovery things that how this practice embodies the integrative practice. So it's very much you are doing, as well as just, it's not all about the mind. It is about that a bit, but there's a lot of practice in there that is, you will tangibly do things for yourself. And also along the way, so I did shamanistic psychology, where you will learn how to do journeys, shamanic journeying, and you will do that many times, you will learn how to go to the lower world, and you will learn how to journey and what that involves, and how it can heal trauma, or how you can process trauma, or whatever it is that comes up during your journey. I did the trauma and transformation module as well, which is by Regina Hess, and she brings a lot of her personal trauma experience to the table, which is her story to tell, so I won't go into that, but it's very poignant, and it's a very I definitely recommend that module if anyone's interested in going into that further. But I know somebody, I can't remember who it was, mentioned something about some trauma, but yeah, you get the opportunity for personal growth, to look at yourself, to it's not just about the intellectual component of that. Like, for example, I had a spiritual emergency experience a few years ago before the course, and I got to experience that through the intellectual lens, and that helped me in ways I really couldn't describe just in a few words myself. So the mind, it can't get you all the way, but actually when you look at things sometimes through the lens of research, it can help you in your embodiment of all kinds of things.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. I don't know who put their hand up first there, and I can see a number of people who are still wanting to bring some questions in. Maybe Julie, and then I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Yes, tell me how to pronounce your name as well. So we'll take you second, okay, after Julie. Is that okay? And then we'll loop back to Dawn. Okay, all right, thank you.
Hi,
everyone. Julie, hi.
Hi, thank you so much to the alum for explaining their experience, especially Addie, what you mentioned about bringing these more transpersonal tools into traditional spaces. I've worked in the corporate and startup space for most of my career, and that's my number one driver for looking into this course, because I deeply feel like we just need to embody ourselves more in the corporate space. But I have a couple of questions, and in interest of time, I will just stick to one. So when Laura, you spoke about going through a module and you're experiencing journeying, was that all done in a digital environment? And how did you, these types of practices that I've been through have been in circles, but physical circles. So I'm interested to know your experience with that, and yeah, just how you went through it, and if you've experienced physical and then the digital, and if there was much of a difference between.
That's a really great question, Julie, because that was one of my primary, I would probably maybe say concerns. It was probably one of my primary concerns of doing this master's course in the first place was, is it a good idea to do a master's degree, particularly one of this kind of nature, online, and will it work? And the answer was yes, it did, but we probably want a little bit more than just a yes or a no. So yeah, in terms of the shamanic journeying, I have not done a shamanic journey in person ever, so I don't have a direct comparison. I've been a yoga teacher, meditation teacher, so I've done a fair amount of kind of workshops of kind of sound healing kind of workshops, things like that, that would also be considered maybe better, air quotes, to do in person. So I've got a little bit of an idea of doing something in person versus online, but with the shamanic journeying, I've only ever done shamanic journeying online. So I can't give you a direct comparison of if it felt like it was better in any way in person, but I didn't feel that I was lacking in anything from the experience of doing it online. And in fact, the module leader of the shamanistic psychology course, he still offers a monthly shamanic journey offering to the students of the Alef trust. So we go to those every month, and he just offers them. So I obviously found them to be beneficial enough because I'm still doing them to this day. And this is the thing with the course as well. Once you've completed, you can get your you can have your certificate and you can sort of trot off and never see the Alef again if you want. They won't pester you, but there's a community that you can involve yourself with in many ways as well, and there's many little ways that they offer, and that's just one of them. You can do a shamanic journey once a month if you want to, but there's lots of other things that you can be a part of. I hope that answers your question a little bit. Yes, I basically found that I was able to hear the drum. I was able to fully immerse in the theta state. I came round in exactly the way that I was expected to do. So yeah, I still had an experience of a shamanic journey. It altered my state of consciousness in the way that I expected. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura, for articulating that. Let me pass this over to, is it Vahid?
I'll help you.
Help me. Yeah.
So hi everyone, it's Vaibhav.
Vaibhav.
Yeah, and my question is more around, so I don't have any background in psychology. I'm mainly a software engineer, and I'm curious and I'm very much fascinated by the course. I love all the topics, and mainly from the alumni, I guess, what are the ways in which you have used this course to, have some change your, I don't know, some sort of career trajectory? How have you used this course to change your life, something like that? On a personal level, I have benefited a lot from all sorts of things, but on a professional level, what are maybe some examples would help me get excited to apply?
Thank you, Vaibhav, for that question. I'm looking around whether Suzanne or Adi. Yeah, Adi, go for it.
Yeah, definitely. Professionally speaking, I think I mentioned it earlier, it's given me a lot more confidence to be upfront about the transpersonal principles and approaches to education. As I said before, I had worked in a very alternative school for 30 years. We had been very influenced by humanistic psychology, but I was quite scared about going that step further. And a lot of the activities we were doing, I mostly work with teenagers. My colleagues were always very nervous about naming things in a certain way. Here I'm in Ireland at the moment, as you can tell from my accent, and we have stone ring forts here. And I was used to doing interesting kind of circle activities with the young people. And I find that now I'm able to say what it is. I'm able to talk about the connection with the earth, the connection with themselves, the connection with each other. We hold hands. And in this post-pandemic world, we need this more than ever. We're dealing with young people who, a lot of them are deeply traumatized by the impact of the isolation that they've experienced over the past 2 years. We've met young people who have never been the age 17, 18, they've never been at a disco. They feel very disconnected from their bodies. They associate learning with their brains. They don't know that it's in the body. And I find myself being able to be more confident and being able to say, okay, guys, take off your shoes, feel the earth, feel what's going on in your body. And I can do that in a way that I couldn't do before. I was always a little bit nervous. How far can I go with them? And that's just one example. Working with young people, it's given me more confidence. And it's what they want. They are yearning, and I can say this now because we were closed for 2 years, and it's my first chance to really try it all out, since doing the masters. And honestly, the timing has been so important. And I know we're all working in different fields, but I'm so glad that I did this program, because the people I'm working with, the young people, really need more of the transpersonal.
Thank you, Adi. And there's so many different ways that people take the learning and the co-inquiry into what they're doing, and so many expansive ways. I'm wondering, Nick, whether we could pull together some more stories there around what people are doing. But again, just to give some examples, in the case studies that I mentioned in year 2, the ideas that are just coming up in that cohort of students. There was one filmmaker, for example, who was envisioning taking young people on a gap year in service to Earth, making that gap year about coming back into relationship with Earth. There was also, let me just cast my mind back. Oh, it's typical, isn't it? When you're on the spot, the ideas aren't coming, the things aren't coming, but there's so many, oh yes, there was one woman who is very, who really wants to enable young women to come into relationship with their cycle. So this is getting, you know, it's quite juicy stuff, some of this. And she is envisaging and rolling out a kind of educational program in schools to help young women come more into relationship with their bodies, and also to help young men understand how is a woman's psyche shaped by menstruation, by the cycle. There's so many different kind of topics and questions that people are sitting with and feeling into, and then sharing collectively. That's one of the things I really love as well, being part of shared conversations and sense-making circles where people are sharing these ideas and then thinking, okay, how can we bring this into different places, wherever we're working or wherever we're of service. I can see lots of other hands up. I think I'd said, Shelley, that you're next, right? And then, or did I say Dawn? Sorry, I'm losing track. Don't want to get this wrong.
So I feel like I've spoke loads, so if Shelley wants to go first, that's cool.
Thank you, Dawn. Go for it, Shelley.
Hey. Thank you, Dawn. Can you hear me? Hi. I think maybe some of my questions have already been answered, but I just wanted to, something that Laura shared about having a spiritual emergency experience, and it helped to, I think what you was, I can't see on the screen. Oh, there you are, Laura. That it helped you to understand it or put it into some context, or it. I had an experience in 2015 that initiated a massive change for me, and it actually, I then started my counselling training, and I'm now a counsellor, and I've always been very drawn to learning more about the type of experience that I had, and it really sounds like this would be a wonderful place to explore that. And it would, because I have it's almost like it's been quite, it could be looked at through many different lenses, the experience, and been given a lot of different contexts, but I always knew that it was something quite a lot more spiritual, and that part of it was quite played down, I think, through certain lenses of it being looked at. But the area of work that I've found, because I've just been drawn along, but I work with trauma, somatic informed trauma, so working with the body, and it's very experiential, but I keep coming back to read the course detail over the last couple of years. So I think my question was, would it help me understand the experience that I had and work with it and give some theory around that, which I think is, maybe the answer there is yes. But I don't have a degree. That's one thing that was a concern, maybe a question of mine that I haven't asked in the chat, was that I currently hold a level 5, so I don't have a full degree. Is that okay in terms of applying for this course?
Okay, I'm hearing the multiple questions that are there.
Sorry.
That's okay. And you know, the bigger question, I don't think I could answer that for you. I think the course can help provide some, it can help you triangulate the experience that you've gone through. There are many others on the course who've had spiritual awakening experiences, or spiritual emergencies, who've worked with many different forms of practice and are bringing that and enriching the learning community and are resourcing each other. So my hope is that the course would help you get a kind of different perspective, and yeah, like I said, triangulate and see, oh, what is that experience, and to feel into that and to make sense of it. But of course, it's also a very personal matter. for what happens in one's life and how we make sense of things. And many different things can help us make sense, right? But yeah, I hope that the learning community that we cultivate is there to serve in those ways as well. We have personal tutors as well. We have a well-being support officer who is there. We're not calling her officer anymore, by the way. It's far too militaristic. We're just changing the name of those kinds of titles. But people who are there to feel into together what it means to navigate these crises that we're encountering in ourselves individually, but also that we're encountering collectively, which are so huge right now, right? Yeah. And in terms of the academic readiness there, Shelley, yes, that's an important question. We try to provide springboards. So we have academic learning webinars that run alongside the other content that we provide that help with the academic skill development. But we still need a certain level of sort of a kind of ground level of knowledge and expertise, if you will, so that you're not feeling like, oh gosh, you know, I've jumped in at the deep end and I'm struggling here. And the way we assess that is through the statements that you're submitting with your application. There's a kind of more personal statement and then a sort of academic essay that you need to write, and that will help us discern whether we feel like, oh yeah, you're in the right place with this, or maybe you need to kind of go and develop those skills a little bit further. And that kind of comes out in the dialogue in the admissions process. I hope that's helpful. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it is. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. We're on the top of the hour, but I can see some more hands up. So I'm happy to keep going. I just want to acknowledge if you need to leave, then, you know, absolutely no problem. But I'm here and I'm happy to answer questions that are still in the room, so we can keep going if that's okay with Nick and Sue, Laura and Adi. If you need to go, please, you know, don't feel constrained.
Can I just come in for a moment? I'm going to put in the chat box because I know a lot of you do need to leave at the top of the hour to please contact me, because we are coming to the end of the application season, and it'd be perfect we get your applications in the next week or two. And to please talk to me. I'm more than happy to have a conversation, to go more in depth with your personal situation, ambitions, and goals for the program.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you. So we'll loop back round. I can see that Dawn and Suzanne and Florian have their hands up. Dawn, we'll come back to you, and then Florian, and then Suzanne, if that's okay. Great.
Thank you. I'll try and be quick. There's a couple of questions in it, but mainly I'm thinking about, like I've done loads of work on studying lots of different frameworks and theosophies and different like ways to like get into consciousness expansion and experiential things. But then you sort of end up building it into your own framework of understanding to integrate that knowledge with your own systematic worldview. But well, I certainly do anyway. And, you know, everything's in its place. And as soon as you get more information, you're like, oh, and it sort of jiggles everything around. But my concern is in writing about this, especially academically, I already really struggle to communicate a lot of it in terms of language, because if you come from one paradigm and it relates to another, so maybe you're talking about the abyss, or Sufi, you call it the realm of creativity, or it's the all or the collective unconscious, and you're talking about one thing, but there's a billion different words like for it. Like, how the hell do you manage that? And especially like looking at the different courses that you've got there, I'm seeing, you know, there's Taoism and then shamanic philosophy. Like, how do we deal with like getting, you know, really being using the correct language in an academic way, especially as well when it's Western and Eastern? Like, there's that kind of like, how do we make sure we're not culturally misappropriating anything, or like, oh my God, panic.
I love those questions, Dawn. In a way, those are exactly the kinds of questions we're grappling with as we're moving through the program together. There are not straightforward answers for that. And, you know, this notion of misappropriation, appropriation of terminology coming from Eastern traditions, indigenous traditions, and so on. We sit with that. And we sit with that with the individual tutors, also in tutor teams, reflecting on, okay, how can we engage with that material in a sensitive way? And we're constantly asking ourselves those kinds of questions. I would say that, take spiritual psychology, there you have a tutor team, they're coming with their individual specialisms, and you sort of deep dive into these options with those individual tutors who are kind of feeling into a particular way of viewing the world, like Taoism you mentioned, right? And then there are overarching webinars and tutorials where you're coming together with students from the other options, where you then collectively sort of sense making. And I sometimes feel like we're puzzling together and feeling into these ideas together, and then languaging together what is meant and what's emerging between us. It's very visceral.
Is that how we then like address, because I mean that's usually our experience of how we integrate those things. I think that's what I always try and do, is like it's less about the knowledge when I'm studying something. It's more about the questions that arises in myself for me to then integrate something and have a proper aha, and then sometimes that's really difficult to even verbalize in any way. But is that the direction that will be coming from how we write about it, that our own experience of how we integrate those things?
Yes, that's a big part. Yes.
Okay, good.
So often in what we're calling these essays, people are writing from their own experiences, and then they're relating to some of the course materials that they have explored, juxtaposing that, kind of looking at that. It's like we're dialoguing, right? All these essays are sort of streams of dialogue where you're bringing your own experience into relationship with what you're maybe reading or what you're maybe experiencing in a practice group that you're a part of, not necessarily within Alef Trust, but maybe also in your life where you're already doing so many different practices that will want to be incorporated. So we work with you fluidly there, and all of that's welcome. Yeah, I hope that's making sense.
Yeah, and so we obviously all come in with our own worldview and the systems that we've put in place, and so I guess do we have to try and explain that from where we've come from, or is it literally just going through each thing and just being where we are?
I think it sort of organically happens. People share stories and consider what has been what is my life, how is my life unfolding, what are these narrative streams that are somehow informing where am I going. It's a sort of constant sensing into emergence together, and a constant acknowledgement of not knowing and ambiguity, and understanding that we're all asking big questions together to which no one has the ultimate answers. So a real big acknowledgement of these learning or growing edges of humanity, really, I think. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
I think I'd said Florian to come on in next, right? And then Suzanne. Yeah.
Yes. Actually, my question is also very connected to Dawn's question. I really felt it. First of all, I want to say I really like the information that you give here. So my question is also about putting the formless into form. I think it's quite a difficult topic, but also in my own experience, let's say if I had a non-ordinary state of consciousness, and afterwards I were to describe it in words, put it into words, I often had the issue that I felt that the words did not contain the experience. So I had the problem that if I would provide these words to someone, let's say in form of a report or anything, then the person could just see the words but not the experience. And this kind of issue, I think it's a big topic also in your program. So I'm really interested in how you handle that as well, and especially when it comes to the style in which you write the reports, the essays, and the dissertation. Is it a modest? Can you write it in a modest and accessible style? Let's say, is that possible?
I want to acknowledge that there is mystery. There's the mystery of being, and that is not and cannot be contained by something like a master's program, which is located in the field of psychology, and then also still sits within a mainstream university, where we are, and I'm looking at the chat window there, and I saw the term conforming coming up, right? we are, of course, as this is an underlying edge for us as the kind of conveners of the course, that we're on the one hand really acknowledging and wanting to acknowledge that depth of being and honor the mystery of being. And then we're finding ourselves in the field of psychology, and we are finding ourselves needing to comply with the regulations of a university in order to frame this, engagement in a master's program way. And I don't have ultimate answers there, but what I would say is that we explore through the lenses of psychology, and they can enable us to approach the mystery without squeezing the life out of it. So there is an acknowledgement of the transcendent, there is a sense of the deeper, and we are feeling our way into that collectively, and we are honoring that there are edges of knowing or things that cannot be known by the intellect, or things that, depending on where you're located, you may not want to clothe it in language. You find your own way through this, and we don't constrain you there. But what we do is we apply the lenses of psychology in order to make sense, and in order to understand the dynamics at play, the processes at play. So kind of reflecting through the frameworks of psychology. Yeah, I hope that helps a little bit, Florian. I'm wondering also whether Laura or Sue want to say anything there from their perspective, having gone through the program and felt what was that tension like, and how did you hold that? Not to put you on the spot, Sue and Laura, but if you've got something you want to weave in.
No, you're not at all. I'll probably let Sue take that one. I'm just quickly answering a chat, fielding the chat a little bit. There's a few coming in on the chat, so I'm just typing those, and then I can come in as soon as I've done that.
Fab, thank you.
What I would say is that Jessica mentioned, the mystery of everything, and this course raises more questions than answers, and there's still a lot of mystery left at the end of it. It doesn't encapsulate everything, but what it does, it broadens your interest and your knowledge and changes your mindset. And I'll give you one example. I was brought up in the 60s, 70s, and psychedelics were a big no-no. There was a massive problem with heroin addiction during the 70s and 80s. And the course talks a lot about psychedelics and, the benefits of an altered state of consciousness. And I really found it difficult to get my head around that, because, my view was that it was wrong. But my view did change. But what the course does, it allows people to respect your view, so that and you can develop your view as well and change your view. You can be very fluid about it, but you still come out with lots of questions, and it just broadens your mind about the whole topic. You're never at the end of it, but I say that in a good way.
That's really good to hear, because unfortunately I have like a negative association with the word academic, but that's from my previous studies, because I've been at a big technical university, and there I had more this issue that it seemed to narrow the mind. But to me, it's great. It's a great thing to hear that you come out with more questions than you entered with. So yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I'm really curious about that, actually, about this challenge of putting the formless into form, and that's what makes me curious about this program. Yeah.
Thank you, Florian. Great questions. You know, the kinds of things that happen in our dissertations. People write poetry, people create dance pieces and include videos. There have been installations, sound installations, art installations, those kinds of things. All of that is welcome, because it's not just alternative ways. Well, we invite alternative ways of knowing to the fore, but also why not use the full spectrum that we have available to us in terms of artistic expression to approach this mystery, the formless, and to come into deeper relationship with it. So yeah, that's all welcome. Thank you.
I just want to say, so I'm anxious about that as well, Florian, I think it's in terms of the meaning making around language. So when I say sad, my experience of sad could be like, it's not like, what is that? But we all have made our own associations. And then thinking about that academically, it feels like even narrower of like, oh no, I've got to use the right word, and there's never going to be the right word exactly. Yeah.
You know, I hear you as well on that sense of academia and it being about narrowing and specialisms and definitions and all that, right? This sort of tunnel vision. I want you to exhale. We try our best in this course to offer alternative ways of working. I say that with the greatest humility, because I know what academia is like. I've come through the performing arts. I did my own undergraduate training in theatre. I left a course in literature, linguistics, and philosophy because it was killing the very thing I loved, language and poetry. This is taking me back 20 years, but in terms of my own personal story, I'm activated there. I hear you. I perceive these issues, and I've lived through those issues as well. And as have my colleagues, I think, and many of us here, we're sort of traumatized by the rigid forms that academia has fallen into. There's a lovely book that I'm sidetracking a little bit, but there's a lovely book that colleagues, I think it was at the University of Canterbury, published, called Re-enchanting the Academy. If you Google that, you'll find it. And that book encapsulates something of what it is that we're exploring here, that we are wanting to bring the soul back into education, that we're wanting to remember together that education is not about filling us with information, but it's about expanding our awareness and sensing, questing together to look at these bigger questions and to feel into them and to kind of see where are the questions taking us. I think it was Rainer Maria Rilke, the poet Rainer Maria Rilke, who said, and I'm paraphrasing, live the questions. Don't try to answer them, but live these questions. And then perhaps sometime in the future, an answer might emerge. Rosemary, do you remember the quote? Yeah. Oh, a kiss. Thank you. Thank you. And we had one more person who had their hand up, but I think she's taken her hand down. I don't know if she's still in the room.
I believe she had to leave, but I'd like to throw another one out because I didn't keep up with it this year. We had a question on the length of the essays.
Oh, yes, varies. So the shortest assignment is around 1,500 words, and then the longest essays around 4,000. That's sort of in between there, around 3,000 words. It's a sort of standard length, I would say. Yeah.
And the dissertation as well, how long?
Yeah. Varies between 10 and 12,000 words, depending on what kind of a method you choose. It's a little bit less for quantitative because those designs are more readily explicated more quickly, more easily. Whereas when you come to do qualitative or mixed methods research, there's more to it that you have to then really explain. And so they tend to be a bit longer. Yeah. Plus appendices. People produce a lot of additional work to support their dissertation. Yeah, but that's the sort of size.
I've also detailed that in the answer in the chat if anyone needs to copy and paste it. It's exactly the same answer as Jessica gave, but just in written form if anyone wants to copy and paste those word things if you need to remember them.
All right. I'm sensing we have kind of arrived at a conclusion for this session. So thank you for staying the course. Thank you for staying with us all this way. I hope that's been really useful to you. And as ever, remain in dialogue with us. You can follow up with Nick, and we can follow up. Also, there are individual questions, things you'd like to really get a handle on. We're here. So just feel free to reach out to us. I wish you well, all of you. Look after yourselves, and perhaps we'll see you in the learning community. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, and thank you
very
to
much.
the alumni. Thank you. Bye for now.
Bye.